Ingres Violin is a black and white photograph by American and French artist and photographer Man Ray, created in Paris in 1924. In 2022, Christie's auction house sold an original print from the first negative for $12.4 million, making Ingres Violin the most expensive photograph in history. Man Ray, you could already find out part of his story in one of the previous videos dedicated to Lee Miller. And now we'll learn more about him and his most expensive photograph. Man Ray, birth name Emanuel Radnitsky, was born in America in 1890. His parents emigrated to Pennsylvania from a province that at that time was part of the Russian Empire, and decades later became part of Lithuania. After the boy was born in 1890, the family lived in Philadelphia for another 7 years and then moved to New York. There he studied art, became interested in the work of Alfred Stieglitz, and through this learned about European avant-garde art. He took the pseudonym by which he is known today, and from 1918 he began to seriously experiment with photographic technologies. Man Ray first picked up a camera at the age of 24 to photograph his art pieces, but quickly realized its potential. Back in 1913, having met Marcel Duchamp, French and American artist, chess player, art theorist, who stood at the origins of Dada and Surrealism, he began to create projects that could not be called either painting or photography. Under the influence of the avant-garde artists, Ray moved to Paris and settled in Bohemian Montparnasse. During the first French period in his work, the photographer met almost all the famous artists and writers of that era. Thanks to his talent as a portrait painter, he became popular. Taking pictures with him meant that a person had achieved a certain position in society. By the end of the 20s, Man Ray became one of the highest-paid photographers in Europe, but did not stop experimenting. Man Ray proved that photography, which was thought to be merely a reflection of reality, could be true creativity. His vibrant Dadaist installations and experiments with technology and light-sensitive paper were rebellious in the best sense of the word. Ray's photographs are full of character, mood, sensuality, bold artistic vision and evocative mysticism. His work was highly appreciated by fellow artists, popular magazines Vogue, Vanity Fair, Time and models, among whom were the entire European and American artistic bohemia. Salvador Dali, Jean Cocteau, Frida Kahlo, and Coco Chanel posed for Man Ray. He photographed many famous writers, including James Joyce, Ernest Hemingway, and Virginia Woolf. After living in France for about 20 years, he was forced to return to the United States before the outbreak of World War II. There, Man Ray began the Hollywood stage of his life and married his longtime friend, muse, and chess partner Juliette Bronner. Quickly becoming a sought-after photographer, he exhibited in the best galleries in California, but he himself called the state a beautiful prison and dreamed of returning to Europe. This was done in 1951, and until his death, the artist lived in his beloved Paris. The photograph Ingres Violin itself was inspired by the work of the leader of European academicism, Jean-Auguste Dominique Ingres, whose admirer was Man Ray. Jean-Auguste Dominique Ingres was a French painter of the first half of the 19th century. He went down in art history thanks not only to his artistic skill, but also to his musical talent. Ingres was passionate about playing the violin. He even performed in famous French orchestras and played music with Franz Liszt. This is how the phraseology Ingres Violin appeared in French, which can be interpreted as weakness, unprofessional hobby, horse, second nature. The multiple meanings of this phraseological unit were skillfully played up by the American photographer Man Ray in his most famous work. Man Ray knew Ingres' work well and admired his painting Valpinkin's Bather, completed in 1808. It was she who gave him the idea for the photograph. In the curves of the female body, the photographer saw the outlines of a violin and, using a collage of 2 black marks on the naked back, created the Ingres violin that made him famous. The American took several photographs in which the model was one of the most famous models and muses of the artists of the Paris school of the 1920s, Kiki from Montparnasse, whom the American met for a number of years, starting in 1921. As an Ingres painting, the Queen of Montparnasse is captured by the artist from the back. She sits topless, with 2 F-shaped sound holes drawn in pencil and ink by Ray on her back to give her body a violin-like silhouette. He initially mapped these sound holes onto the original, first, photograph and then took a photo of the resulting changes. Dividing the image was one of the frequent surrealist practices. Also, the concealment of the limbs contributed to a greater identification of the female body and the musical instrument, referring to the tradition of turning music into an allegory of love play. Kiki's thighs are wrapped in fabric, and she sits on a checkered blanket. The face is turned 3/4 to the left, revealing the profile and long drop earring on her left ear. A striped turban is tied on his head, under which one can see the short women's hairstyle that was fashionable in those years, the bob. It is assumed that the oriental headdress was used not only as a reference to Ingres paintings, but also to reduce the individuality of the model and achieve greater abstraction. Fabrics and a turban, in addition, add greater eroticism to the image. The light comes from the right and almost evenly illuminates the back of the woman, whose body stands out with its whiteness against the general dark background of the photograph. The photograph was first published in the Surrealist magazine Literature in June 1924. In 1993, the author's photograph, which previously belonged to the founder of Surrealism André Breton, ended up in the collection of the Pompidou Center in Paris. Over time, Man Ray's work was recognized as one of the most famous photographs not only of the author himself, but also of Surrealism in general.